Good morning. Let's take a breath together. So we're still in our monthly theme, Mindful Mavericks. And essentially what that boils down to is keeping our attention in the moment, being aware of what we're focused on, and daring to get outside of the box. And perhaps by the end of the month, we might even throw the box away. Perhaps. It's possible. So this week, our talk title is Mindful Speech. And oh my goodness, could we use some of that now? There's a lot of language flying around, is there not? And here's the thing that we know in our teachings, but sometimes in our personhood we forget, is that our word is creative. And it's creative whether it comes out of our mouth or not. Because when we talk about the word being creative, we're not talking about the words. We're talking about what's behind the words. What meaning do you hold about the words? What belief is operating in you? What mental equivalent, what image do you hold about those words? Because rest assured, the creative power that is us in form is creating. It doesn't create sometimes, it doesn't filter and only create the good stuff. It creates constantly based on belief that is impressed into the activity of the infinite soul, whether we call that law, soul, the soil, however you understand it. Just understand there's no place where that activity stops. That's the good news. Could be the bad news, depending on what's going on in our belief systems. Because we have absolute free will to use the mind of the infinite however we choose. And so yes, some of us, conscious or unconscious, intentional or unintentionally, use the creative power that we are in form to hurt. To hurt ourselves, to hurt others, to hurt humanity, to hurt nature, to do harm. And we need to own that that is part of this unfiltered free will that is the nature of our being and the creative process. Terence Gorski, if any of you have ever worked in the treatment field, Terence Gorski is pretty clear in explaining our thoughts create our feelings create our urges create our actions. And that's how habit comes to be in this thing we call the human life. And habits turn into beliefs, and beliefs become deeply unconscious and automated the longer that we hold them. Don Miguel Ruiz, in the first chapter of the Four Agreements, and I stress the first chapter, because if we miss what he's offering us in that first chapter, the Four Agreements aren't really going to give you everything they can. So what he talks about in that first chapter is how we are conditioned as human beings. He talks about how we come into this life perfect, innocent, lovely, a blank slate, if you will. And the process of conditioning our mental capacities begin immediately. And it's a process of language. If you think of the human body as a computer, and understand that language is the programming code. We begin to understand how we operate. And it's important to understand our programming code if we have any hope to change it. And so language, every letter, every word has a meaning. Only when we're being indoctrinated as children, we have no earthly idea what the meaning is. And we really don't have a choice about what we're taking in. It's given to us by our parents, by our grandparents, by school systems. It's literally our system of socialization. And so when someone says to you, "You're beautiful, you're a good child," all you know is, "I'm beautiful, I'm a good child." You may not have a clue what that means, but what you know is that it is issued from a resonance of love. That it's issued as a reward, and it connects with your essence, with your sensing being as something that uplifts you. So it must be good. And then some of us hear messages that you're ugly and you're stupid. And so we take that in. I'm ugly. I'm stupid. Because we don't know what ugly and stupid is yet. But what we sense is a completely different vibration than the expression that you're lovely and you're smart and you're handsome and you're pretty. Those come with a different vibration. And so we're beginning to learn, we're beginning to be indoctrinated into this system of reward punishment. And we learn very quickly that agreement gets me rewards and disagreement gets me punishment. And so it's no wonder that the voice within us that would have any hesitation about this vibration doesn't match. We don't speak up because we've been systemically taught, indoctrinated to keep our mouths shut. Psychologists, it's interesting, I did a comparison of Ruiz's teaching and several psychologists. What Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in the parental conditioning, Carl Rogers talks about what he calls conditions of worth standards that we are taught as we grow up. And the cognitive prison that those things build. Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck talk about those in terms of cognitive behavioral therapy. Very much in alignment with what Karen Skorsky talks about, with our thoughts create our feelings create our urges create our actions. They become our behavior. And it's quite unconscious when we really aren't aware of how this process is happening from the get-go. The psychologist, where did your name go? Oh well, I'm not seeing it in my notes. Suffice it to say, he relates it to what happens with children and these ideas. He relates it to Plato and Plato's cave and being imprisoned by shadows because he didn't know they weren't shadows. And how much of our thought process is shadows, and we don't know they're shadows. Because to investigate our beliefs brings up that very early childhood fear of reward punishment. That I'm not allowed to challenge these things. In adulthood, we call that cognitive dissonance. In spirituality, we call that revelation. I often hear us talk about jumping straight to the solution. And I found a passage on page 197 in our Science of Mind book that parallels exactly what these psychologists and what Don Miguel Ruiz is talking about. And I'm going to read this in gender-neutral terms. Although people are inherently a perfect idea, our identity covers this idea with the forms of thought which we image. We come into this life subjective to the race consciousness and to our own environment. We unfold our own personality and begin to create new subjective thought. I'm going to pause there. When he's saying subjective thought, what he's referring to is we are literally in subjugation. The creative process is subject to thought. It must create what we think into law. And so we are literally subject to that. We think and observe, draw certain conclusions and deductions, and incorporate them within our mentality until at last we also become a part of the relative cause of our objective existence. And what he's talking about there is that we begin to reason because we're in form, and so we're assessing form, and we're reasoning from form to create more thoughts about form. And as we do that, we become identified with the objective world, and we forget our spiritual truth. Just the same way that our conditioning from our parents, we become subjective to thought, and we begin to relate to the objective world, the object world, and we forget the truth of our being that we knew when we arrived. Dr. Holmes goes on to say this: healing, then, is accomplished by uncovering. So before I get to the solution, let's deal with that piece. I think it's the most uncomfortable challenge that we struggle with. And I get it. Who doesn't want to jump right from problem to solution without going through the process? I'll take that. Except with unconscious beliefs, it doesn't work. Because unconscious belief, by definition, we are unaware that they're operating. And so we must have the courage to engage in the process of revelation. Knowing that as it is revealed, we become empowered to heal. There's nothing to run from. Because the same mind that created the limitation creates the freedom. If we will allow ourselves to know what in the world we're thinking now. What is holding our attention? What is holding our emotion? Where is our fire? Is it something we're aware of? Or our attention is busy attending to unconscious beliefs that show up as defensive behavior, that show up as fearful behavior, that show up, quite honestly, oftentimes as complete confusion. We don't even know why we're reacting the way we're reacting. And perhaps that is the moment right there when we recognize that how we're showing up is out of integrity with who someplace in us knows us to be, that we stop and simply ask, what am I thinking? And then answer the question. He goes on. Healing then is accomplished by uncovering, neutralizing, and erasing false images of thought, and letting the perfect idea reflect itself through subjective mind into the body. Now what I hear there is change your thinking, change your life. That when we embody truth that already lives within us, it must show up as our life. And so really the only thing we're doing is navigating the blocks. We don't take them away, we neutralize them. It's just like, I've used this example, I'll probably use it until I have no other example to use. You have a jar of acid. We don't take the acid out, we add other chemicals to change it to a base. We cannot remove a thought while we focus on it. We reveal it, and then we tell the truth to it. If I am feeling afraid, I take a look. Is it a human, legitimate fear? Is there something in my environment that I really actually, just like every critter that can run from danger, I should go? Great, do that. But if it's anything else, if it's thought fear, what am I telling myself? Is it real or is it imagined? Is it made up? Is it quite possibly anchored in that very deep childhood reward punishment conditioning that I am afraid to step out and use my voice for good because I might get punished? Someone might disagree with me. Someone might have an opinion about me. I assure you they will. They will. And you know how we know that with absolute certainty? Because we have opinions about other people. Hello? The poet Audre Lorde says this. I have come to believe over time, I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. Let me read that again. I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. Are we willing to be mindful mavericks? Are we willing to understand that all of creation is constantly creating and we get to choose? In the Bible, in the book of John, the first chapter, John brings forth, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And if we do the study, we tie that back to the very beginning of Genesis. In the beginning, created God. What he's doing is tying it all together. And what he's doing is pointing out that we are the Word of God in physical form. That we are literally that in emanation. And so the same word that in the beginning is operating as me and you, is operating as everyone. That, my friends, is the amazing, unlimited power that lives within you. And so everything that is up in our world right now to be healed is an answer to prayer. We as an organization set forth a vision of a world that works for everyone. What did another psalm say? Healing then is accomplished by uncovering. We are in the process of the fulfillment of our vision. I invite you to lean into the process, to find your voice, to have the courage to use your voice, even when what you have to say might sort of kind of in the company that you're keeping be a little uncomfortable and unpopular. So what? So what? There is a divine power within you that knows exactly how to navigate that discomfort. There is a divine power within you that knows exactly how to navigate those conversations. And the only requirement is that we stand in the truth. That we know the truth. That we understand that oneness is not just nice words, but that oneness literally means what happens to any individualized expression happens to every individualized expressions in the one body. I like to use the example of our own physical body. And so if you're struggling to understand the interconnectivity of oneness, I invite you, when you go to bed tonight, set your alarm for 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. When it goes off, get up, don't turn on any lights, wander around your house until your big toe finds a piece of furniture. And then notice which cell in your body is not aware of that incident. Every cell in your body will instantly be aware that your big toe just found a piece of furniture. That is the oneness that is available for us to lean into. And that as we embody, as we embrace a greater understanding of oneness, we are called to a greater opportunity of healing, a greater opportunity of knowing the truth and using, directing, guiding mind into the activity of law to manifest a world that absolutely works for everyone. Let's take this into prayer. So as I breathe, I recognize the infinite, the divine presence, the perfection of creation itself, the absolute, infinite possibility, pure love, pure light, infinite intelligence, absolute abundance. That power, that presence, it creates out of itself, by itself, to be itself. And as I recognize the truth of what it is, I know that I must be that in form. And that what is true of me is true of all life in the truth of oneness. That this divine everything individualizes itself in brilliant, diverse multiplicity, unrepeatable, intentional, forms of itself, expanding its experience of itself, expressing its heart's desire as each glorious creation. And so I speak my word, claiming and affirming that we as humanity are in the midst of and claiming our divine revelation of truth. That we stand in that gap of understanding, knowing truth, holding all in love, being the peace that is the divine, bringing forth love in greater and greater expressions, holding a vision of equity, refusing to be moved until it is made manifest in form. That this is the work of oneness. Grateful to know that I, in human form, do not have to figure this out. I simply have to yield to the voice within that guides and directs the activity, listening to the soul of Creator that lives within. Grateful that it knows exactly what to do, and that I simply say yes in gratitude, yes as an activity of faith, yes to follow what is mine to do, to support and uplift all of creation. So I invite you in this magnificence of oneness, recognizing that the word spoken is the word spoken for all of creation, to join me as we anchor this by saying, Amen, Ashe, Shalom, Aho. And so it is.